This is Kurata, a programmer who's obsessed with mechs, giant robots and all that stuff. So, when his company gave him a new project, it was like a dream come true because it involved designing a new toy robot. Thanks to his obsession, he whipped it up in no time. Afterward, our protagonist spent his salary on every new mech he could get his hands on. But, since this is an isekai story, obviously the iconic Truck-kun made an appearance, and just like that, it took him out and sent him to another world. In this new world, he's known as Ernesti Echeverria, or Ernie to his buddies. Now, our protagonist is in the body of a young boy from an aristocratic family. While he was on his way home with his grandfather and mother, they were suddenly attacked by giant demons. Fortunately, Grandpa knew how to handle a sword, and so did his mother, Celestina, who used magic. Together, they held their ground against the monster. But then another demon showed up and attacked the carriage where our protagonist was. Just as it was about to devour him, his father appeared in a robot called Shield King and easily shot down the demon, saving his son's life. When Ernie woke up, he realized he had reincarnated in another world. And when he looked around, his eyes lit up at the sight of the mechs he loved so much. Instead of thanking his dad, he ran straight to hug the robot. And so begins this story of demons and giant robots, where our protagonist gets the chance to fulfill his dream of piloting one. Ernie was born in the city of Lihyla, a place known for training knights runners, pilots of these mechs. But his dad told him he had to master magic and swordsmanship before getting into one, and he had to grow a bit taller, too. So, for the next 3 years, Ernie trained hard, mastering both the sword and magic. It came easily to him because magic in this world works like programming, and as we know, Ernie was a programming prodigy in his previous life. By the time he was still very young, he was already using advanced magic, training every morning. During his training, he met his best friends, Arkid and Adultrud. They became friends after Ernie saved one of them from falling off a roof. From that point on, they agreed to learn magic from Ernie, and they became close friends. Soon, they all entered the Night Runner Academy in Lihyla, and right from the first classes, Ernie stood out. Thanks to his obsession, he was way ahead in the basics of magic that everyone else had to learn. In fact, Ernie even considered skipping classes when the professor told him he was too short to pilot a mech. But then he had an idea. He would design his own robot, one that fit him perfectly. Of course, Ernie was eager to grow up, but impatience got the better of him. Outside the academy, he helped rescue a boy who was being bullied by some older students. With the help of his friends, they recovered a hammer that had been taken from this boy named Batson, who, unlike Ernie, was training to become a knightsmith, a robot mechanic. Since Ernie was determined to customize his own weapons, Batson turned out to be the best partner he could have made so early on in school. Later, Ernie visited the workshop where Batson worked and shared one of his ideas for customizing his magic wand. He modified it into a kind of shotgun to make it more efficient. When one of the blacksmiths saw his design, he was really impressed. That's how Ernie got his first weapon, which he proudly used in the academy's trials. Ernie even asked one of his teachers if he could skip the basic magic classes if he aced the test. When Ernie was ready for his shooting test, he pulled out his modified wand, shocking everyone with the power of his shots. He completely aced the test, skipping the beginner classes and moving on to more advanced ones. From that moment, Ernie gained a certain level of fame at the academy. 3 years later, Ernie was still determined to understand the mechs better. He was even studying how to build his own ether reactor, the heart of the mechs that powered them with energy, something that was completely classified. But Ernie seemed to have knowledge that anyone would envy. With Batson's help on the technical side, Ernie was ready for his next challenge. He had to say goodbye to his mechanic friend because he had a field test coming up, where he would be joined by students from other years. The test involved heading to a forest with a low demon population, a perfect place for some to practice swordsmanship or magic, while others trained in handling their mechs. During this test, Ernie met Stephanie, the sister of his friends, who was well aware of Ernie's achievements. She approached him, but another girl, who had no intention of letting anyone steal her dear Ernie, jumped in to show her dominance. After that, Ernie had a chat with Stephanie, learning that while she was his friend's sister, they weren't recognized as nobles because they had different mothers, making them illegitimate children. Ernie asked them what they planned to do about their situation: accept it, ruin the family, or cut ties completely. However, his friend stopped him, saying there was no need to go that far. Regardless, Ernie let them know that they could always count on him, no matter how dark things might get. Afterward, while Ernie was busy admiring his senpai's mechs, a friendly guy named Edgar showed up and kindly offered to show him the inside of his robot. Ernie almost lost it from excitement since he was finally about to see how a silhouette knight was piloted. However, the moment was interrupted when an alarm went off. a stampede of demons was approaching. Everyone quickly got ready to evacuate, but the upperclassmen were in the vanguard, putting themselves in danger without proper support during the initial waves. Not one to stand by, Ernie rushed to help since his friend's sister, Stefania, was in serious trouble. Despite her strong magic, the sheer number of enemies had her cornered. Just when things looked bleak, Ernie arrived with his magic gun wand and blasted the demons back, with help from Kid and Addie, who backed him up to turn the tide until the mechs arrived to cover them. However, it was strange that so many monsters appeared, and it turned out that a powerful demon was behind it all. This demon had already surprised a group of knights protecting a nearby stronghold and wreaked havoc there, crushing every mech and knight in its path with ease and fiery breath. The desperate knights called for reinforcements from the Hampton Order, a group of warriors who might be their last hope. But when the messenger reached them, he was dismayed to find that there were very few knights available. As soon as they learned that the students were in the Crotch Forest, they rushed out to save them. Meanwhile, Ernie was wrapping up the rescue of his classmates, and Stefania personally thanked him, hugging him tightly. Not that Ernie minded, but it certainly bugged Addie. Thus, Ernie had to deal with two girls fighting over him. But the rosy moment didn't last long because the giant demon, known as Behemoth, caught up with them. Ernie had suspected something was off, and it turned out that the monsters were fleeing from this massive creature. The senpais tried to hold it back to protect the other students, but some of the upperclassmen were overly confident in their mech strength. One of them panicked after seeing a fellow student get killed, and in his desperation, he fled, only to get his mech stuck. Ernie saw this and quickly knocked the guy out without hesitation. Then, he hopped into the mech and made a few quick customizations to make it fit his smaller size. Using his magic gun wand, Ernie reprogrammed the mech to optimize it for his style. With his programming skills, he got the machine up and running, fulfilling his dream of piloting a real mech. Meanwhile, his friends started suspecting what Ernie had been up to, but there was no time to chat because Edgar, their senpai, was in serious trouble facing Behemoth. At the last moment, Ernie arrived to help, saving Edgar from fighting alone due to Dietrich's earlier retreat. Ernie's mech wasn't doing much damage to the monster despite all his efforts. He could barely scratch it. After trying everything, Ernie even hit it with an attack directly to its weak spot, but Behemoth didn't back down. It had strengthening crystals that made it almost impossible to pierce its defenses. Despite the struggle, Ernie's actions bought enough time for reinforcements to arrive. The veteran warriors were shocked to see a student holding off Behemoth, but they quickly prepared an attack to weaken the beast. However, Behemoth wasn't going down easily. When its legs were targeted, it unleashed a massive fire attack, destroying several mechs. Seeing his beloved mechs get obliterated enraged Ernie, so he jumped back into the fight alongside the reinforcements. Once Dietrich recovered, Ernie came up with a plan to finally take down Behemoth. He gave up control of the mech to lead the charge himself. He prepared a powerful barrier attack to electrocute the giant demon. The first part of the plan worked, but Behemoth wasn't giving up. Ernie and Dietrich worked together, dodging the monster's strikes, and Ernie finally landed a decisive blow, bringing the colossal demon down. After the battle, the students and knights realized that a mere student had helped win the day. Ernie's friends weren't surprised, though. They knew what he was capable of. Ernie even confessed to them that stealing a mech was something he wouldn't hesitate to do again, but to avoid risking his life, he was determined to build a robot perfectly suited to his size for maximum efficiency. Word of Ernie's achievements spread, eventually reaching the ears of the king himself. The king, wary of Ernie's growing power at such a young age, summoned him for a personal audience. Ernie appeared before the king alongside his grandfather. Under the guise of rewarding him, the king wanted to test him, so he asked what Ernie's greatest wish was. After thinking it over, Ernie made an ambitious request, something only the king could grant: information about the ether reactor, a secret that only the king himself knew. The monarch accepted Ernie's request, but defeating the Behemoth wasn't enough of an achievement. So, the king challenged him to create his own model of a shield knight. If Ernie wanted the plans for the core, he first had to create the shell. This put a bit of pressure on his grandfather, but everything worked out perfectly for Ernie, as he could now work freely at the academy. Awesome! However, all the attention Ernie was getting made Lord Serati, the father of his friends, keep an eye on him. He even asked his children to watch over Ernie until he built his first mech. But setting that aside, the very next day, Ernie wasted no time and dove right into working on his blueprints. When he arrived at the workshop, he caught everyone's attention with his ideas, especially after witnessing firsthand the mech that had been destroyed in the fight against Behemoth. This even caught the ear of the workshop chief, and although Batson tried to stop him out of embarrassment, Ernie's ideas ended up shocking everyone. First, he proposed using braided crystal fabric to strengthen the robots, which would free up some motor limitation. This was something he learned from his previous battle. When his senpais, Edgar and Helvey arrived, Ernie shared another idea, simplifying long-range attacks by giving Mechs 2 extra arms exclusively for ranged weapons, rather than having one hand holding a sword and the other a wand. This would make attacks much easier, and with some added programming, it wouldn't affect the controls. Helvey tested this out, and it made the attacks easier to perform. But there was still more to prepare. Ernie took advantage of the fact that his grandfather was the academy director and asked for permission to start building smaller mech parts so more students could practice piloting. Ernie's friends, concerned about his safety, asked him to teach them how to pilot mechs too. So, the entire academy got to work, and Batson, along with his crew, helped develop the smaller versions of the Silhouette Knights. This made training a bit tricky as everyone had to adjust, but even Edgar was surprised at how much Dietrich had changed since his encounter with Ernie. The first tests after making modifications to the mechs were a success, and Helvey was the first to try them out. The braided crystal fabric made controlling the mechs a bit harder at first, but it was just a matter of adapting. The shooting test, however, was a huge success, with all shots hitting their mark. The final test was a simulated battle between the mechs. Dietrich faced off against Helvey, and although Dietrich had excellent technique, Helvey's brute force, boosted by the modifications, allowed her to corner him. Despite his disadvantage, Dietrich made a bold move by charging straight at her and nearly turned the tables, but Helvey knocked him down before he could finish his attack. Just as Helvey was about to land the finishing blow, she ran out of mana and lost the match. Helvey was a bit bummed, but everyone else was thrilled because the tests had been a huge success. While they needed to optimize mana consumption, everything else worked perfectly. During the celebration, however, a suspicious man snuck in and slipped away from the party. He met with a shady group in a hideout, where they paid him for reporting that the tests had been successful. Now, who are these people? It seems they belong to a foreign order that's been plotting to steal information. Back with our protagonists, the main issue they were facing was resolving the high mana consumption in the new models. Increasing the energy container would add more weight and increase mana usage. Ernie hit a roadblock until Addie suggested that they turn the crystal fabric into something like muscle fibers for the robots. Applying this idea, they optimized the energy usage, even though it made the mechs look more buffed up. Ernie also applied this idea to the smaller robot versions, which he tested with his friends, and the results were outstanding. These revolutionary modifications caught a lot of attention, so Ernie had to present his work to the Silver Knights laboratory. But don't forget, Lord Serati had ordered his children to keep an eye on Ernie. Trusting their father's good intentions, they reported the results to him, and he, in turn, informed Duke Dixgard. The Duke sent the Crimson Hair Squad to test out the new models. Supposedly, they were sent to fight a lava monster, hoping to ruin all of Ernie's hard work. But our protagonists easily defeated the demon, and the Duke was slapped with the undeniable success of the new models. Later, we see those shady people again, members of the Bronze Fang Order. They discussed how impressive Ernie's new mech model was compared to theirs, acknowledging that they shouldn't underestimate the possibility of these mechs surpassing the Casadius barrier. Meanwhile, the expedition team returned home, but the only one missing was Ernie himself. Addie was eager to reunite with him, but that didn't happen because Ernie had been summoned by Duke Dixgard. The Duke wanted to interview him about the modifications he made, and Ernie gave a detailed explanation of his work. But once Ernie finished, the Duke coldly informed him that he would take credit for the entire investigation and present it to the king as his own. In other words, he planned to steal Ernie's work. However, Ernie didn't care at all. In fact, he was relieved that someone else could present everything he had said to the king in his place. This reaction completely baffled the Duke, as he couldn't understand why the protagonist would so easily give up his hard work. The Duke pressed him to learn his true intentions, and Ernie simply said that he didn't mind because he'd present an even better model to the king next time. The Duke, unable to believe there could be further improvements to the already advanced designs, couldn't comprehend how someone could create a circuit filled with so many innovative ideas, something that hadn't been done in 300 years, especially since the king himself had tried something similar in the past. In the end, the Duke let Ernie be, figuring it was just part of the kid's passion. Meanwhile, back home, Ernie's friends, along with Stefania, interrogated her father about Ernie's absence. They suspected he had leaked information to take advantage of their friend's hard work. However, her father explained that if the Duke requested a meeting, with how brilliant Ernie was, he'd likely convince the Duke to support his research, which is exactly what happened. Ernie ended up staying at the Duke's stronghold to continue working on improvements. The workshop chief, Ernie's senpais, and especially Addie, under the pretext of retrieving one of their mechs, decided to visit Ernie to check up on him. But not far from where Ernie was, in Casadius, demons suddenly appeared, wreaking havoc. This gave the shady figures who had been watching Ernie from the shadows a chance to act. Taking advantage of the Duke sending out his mech to fight, the Bronze Fang Order attacked the weakened soldiers to steal the new models that Ernie had modified. Using those very same robots, the Order infiltrated Casadius, the stronghold of the Count, and stole even more of Ernie's designs, along with some older models that the Duke already had. With the chaos, Ernie wanted to get involved, but the Duke wouldn't allow it, as Ernie's life was too important. Instead, the Duke sent out his trump card, a powerful warrior from his personal guard, equipped with a strong robot. This warrior faced the leader of the Order on equal footing. However, Ernie's modifications were so overpowered that the leader of the Order defeated the knight, thanks to the weapon accessories that gave her the edge over the older models. In the end, she managed to escape with only 2 of the new models for her foreign country, leaving disappointed that they couldn't steal more. On their way back, the thieves ran into Ernie's friends, who had just arrived with the caravan. Dietrich and Edgar asked the Count's mech what was happening, but when they didn't get a response, they barely avoided a surprise attack. This kicked off a full-blown battle between the robots, now more evenly matched due to the modifications made on both sides. The leader of the Order was caught off guard by this, and one of her subordinates sacrificed himself to hold back the students, allowing her to escape. Kid and Addie couldn't just stand by while their senpais were being attacked. So, using the mini models that Ernie had created, they jumped into the fight. Even though it seemed too late, the battle was still in full swing. From atop a tower, Ernie watched the fights unfold, thinking about how to get involved. But without his own mech, it would be difficult to face off against a silhouette knight. Suddenly, he saw his friend's carriage arriving and realized he could get his hands on some armor he had created. He successfully equipped it and charged into battle, taking down one enemy after another by either destroying their heads or electrocuting them. With his help, they secured the stronghold. Then, alongside the Crimson Hair leader, Ernie set out to recover the stolen robots. On their way, a battle was raging between the Bronze Fang leader and Edgar. Edgar was slowly getting cornered despite Kid and Addie taking care of the other enemy. During the sword fight, Edgar took a hit that damaged the central helmet of his mech, just as Dietrich appeared. Dietrich was torn between helping his friend or pursuing the enemy who had stolen the robot. Before he could decide, Kid and Addie showed up to offer support, and Ernie arrived with the Crimson Hair leader. They quickly decided to split up the work to chase down the thief, but just then, a horde of monsters appeared, even larger than the one they faced in the school forest. Everyone had to deal with the monsters first, and they spent the entire night fighting off the beasts, ultimately letting the thief escape with the new model. Later, the king summoned them to congratulate them for their hard work, but he also requested greater confidentiality regarding Ernie's work. He established a new order of knights called the Silver Phoenix, with Ernie as its leader, giving him the freedom to work on his new designs. Since the enemy country had stolen one of the new designs, they would now have to create even stronger mechs. Edgar apologized to Helvey for letting himself get defeated, but rumors in the Duke's halls indicated that the enemy country had a powerful network. Apparently, they had used a magic potion known as a curse to manipulate the demons, explaining why they had appeared near the stronghold. So, with all of this happening, it was time to return to the protagonist's hometown, Laihala. While dreaming of the mech from his old world, Ernie found himself being clung to by Addie, who didn't want to let go of him. Meanwhile, back at the Silhouette Knight lab, the researchers were going crazy over Ernie's innovation. A jealous guy, who hadn't seen such changes in a long time, wanted to make a name for himself by challenging our protagonist. After the incident at Casadius, the higher-ups were discussing the threat from neighboring Western countries, suspecting that after the theft of Ernie's model, they might soon be under attack. As a result, they agreed to organize the Eagle Knight Order to stay alert for any reckless moves from the hidden enemy. On the other hand, while having dinner with his family, Ernie informed them that he was now the leader of a new order created by the king, which would be responsible for developing the new model of the Silhouette Knight. This news practically put the entire academy under Ernie's control, as it was designated as his base. After saying goodbye to Stefania, who couldn't stop hugging him, Ernie started his new year, ready to implement changes to increase the productivity of the new robot model. He assigned a silhouette gear to the warriors, allowing them to move heavy loads, and received a mech from Duke Dixgard for modification. As time went on, everything seemed to be going smoothly. Ernie created several prototype models, not only to improve the speed of the robots, but also to design a few with specialties like defense or attack. Meanwhile, Ernie's order was welcoming new students, including a suspiciously charming girl who infiltrated the academy. Her name was Nora, a member of the Eagle Order, and she was there to reinforce the security of the work being done at the academy. Addie, however, found the whole meeting suspicious, fearing Nora would would steal Ernie away. But instead of that, Ernie took advantage of the situation and invited Nora to help with some tests. These tests nearly cost him his life, as he ended up crashing into a tree while testing a new propulsion system. Ernie got scolded for his obsession despite the risks, but people didn't understand that trial and error were part of the process. In the end, Ernie learned more about the necessary modifications, so he let the girls go take a bath while he stayed behind working on the robots. He even developed a special dagger that worked as a key to start the mechs, ensuring no one could steal them again. He also designed a mech that could be piloted by two people, choosing Kid and Addie for the task since they were a compatible pair. He continued to make various other modifications to ensure they had different models for specific tasks, preparing them for an upcoming battle that was being organized between the Royal Labs robots and the ones Ernie had created. The highly anticipated moment arrived, and the mechs from both sides marched into the arena. The Royal Labs machines were essentially improved versions of what Ernie had already made, enhanced with the best pilots the kingdom had. But Ernie's mech stole the show. Instead of walking, it galloped like a centaur, pulling a carriage behind it that contained a variety of mechs he had designed. Ernie's entrance caught the attention of the king, who was visibly impressed, as was everyone else. But the real test would be in the arena. So, let the fight begin. Everyone was eager, as the battle was set to be a 6 versus 4 match. The Royal Labs mechs were weaker in power, so they had the numbers advantage to balance things out. As soon as the match started, Ernie launched the first attack. His mech had a mechanism that allowed it to fly, surprising the entire crowd. However, despite managing to take on 3 opponents at once, the excessive mana consumption forced him to retreat to rest, leading the rest to his friends. The Centaur mech's speed allowed Ernie's team to strike at the center of the enemy force, with Dietrich and Edgar also combining their attack and defense in a way that stunned their opponents with their power. Edgar even managed to electrocute one of the enemies. At first, Ernie's team dominated the battle, but as their energy began to wear down, the skilled pilots on the opposing side maintained their defenses, giving the more stable Royal Lab mechs the advantage in endurance. Nevertheless, our protagonist's team managed to make a comeback thanks to the efforts of Kid and Addie, who took down some mechs, along with the duo of Edgar and Dietrich. But it was Ernie's decisive participation that ultimately led to their victory. In the end, it was more of a close tie since there were still some things to improve in Ernie's design. However, this performance was enough to catch the eye of a noble named Emrys, as well as earn recognition from the renowned rival pilots. But the one who was most captivated was the lab's blacksmith, who rushed over to interrogate Ernie about what he had done with the Centaur mech. Ernie, excited by the enthusiasm, seemed to gain another mech-obsessed partner. The situation got so intense that Ernie's friends had to separate them so the king could speak with the lab chief to polish Ernie's designs and make them more efficient in combat. With this agreement in place, 2 months passed, during which several changes took place, including King Ambrosius abdicating the throne to his son, Ryothemus. At the same time, Prince Emrys, having just returned from abroad, was eager to begin his training. Meanwhile, Ernie graduated from the academy. Despite barely attending classes, he had spent most of his time being a mech mechanic. Due to his achievements, he graduated with honors and relocated the Silver Phoenix Order to Fort Olver, where he would refine his inventions. He was also tasked with a special request from King Ambrosius, who needed a new personal mech since his current one would now be passed down to his son. Ernie was summoned to create a new mech, and in the presence of Prince Emrys, whom he met during a visit to the castle, Ernie was tasked with making a mech focused on strength. A few days later, Ernie unveiled 2 robots with identical specifications but different designs. One was a golden lion, and the other, a silver tiger. Ambrosius and Emrys preferred the golden lion, and to determine its pilot, they decided to settle the matter with a friendly duel. Prince Emrys, channeling his grandfather's younger days, fought a tough battle where both strength and agility were tested. Despite his age, the king skillfully wielded his lance, a technique that had earned him fame in his youth when he secretly fought against demons. But the prince held his own with his sword technique, even managing a near finish, though his grandfather countered with a judo throw. Ultimately, Emrys earned the title of the Golden Lion's pilot. While all this was happening, it seemed that in the forest, a large number of demons were stirring, disturbing a mysterious being who sensed their presence. But for now, that could be set aside, as a crisis erupted in the kingdom due to an armored demon horde, organized like ants, heading toward the Tuzar Gorge and specifically the town of Alfrium. Defending this region was critical because it was where the kingdom of Fremavilla produced the ether reactors. If the demons destroyed the place, Ernie wouldn't be able to design any more mechs. Enraged by this, Ernie launched into action, heading to a fortress threatened by the massive number of demons. Despite the guards' best efforts, the enemy's numbers didn't seem to dwindle, and all they could do was hold out for reinforcement. At the critical moment, the Silver Phoenix Order arrived, and with their increased numbers, numbers, the centaur mechs cut down the demons in droves. But that wasn't all. When the prince's and former king's units disembarked, they wiped out nearly half of the monsters in a single strike. Not to mention, Dietrich's and Edgar's squad was performing exceptionally well. However, the demons wouldn't stop until their queen was neutralized. That's why Ernie charged ahead to confront her. Transported by a carriage with his friends, they arrived at the forest where the queen resided, a beast as dangerous as the Behemoth. This meant she had immense resilience, but with the help of his friends, Ernie managed to wound her by tearing off the part of her body that held her offspring. With the queen weakened, they coordinated their attacks on her limbs to bring her down, giving Ernie the chance to deliver the final blow. With this victory secured, Ernie's achievements continued to grow. However, the promise made by the king had yet to be fulfilled. But this time, it was the perfect opportunity. King Ambrosius, keeping his word, ordered the lab chief to show Ernie how ether reactors were made in the village of Abray. The androgynous lab chief, Ulfer, hailed from this region, and it turned out that the people who made the reactors were a race called the Abray, known for their longevity and their ability to use special magic to create the reactors. For further explanation, Ernie had to meet with the elder leader of the Abray, who granted him permission to learn their secrets, though warning him that he might not fully grasp the essence of the reactor. Nonetheless, Ernie was eager to learn. He spent 3 months in the village, mastering the art of creating the heart of the robots. The difficulty lay in the unique Abray magic that easily manipulates mithril, a highly durable material that absorbs ether from the environment and converts it into mana. This process is what allows the creation of the reactor, which is powered by demon crystals. The stronger the demon, the more powerful the reactor. To complete this complex piece, a special encryption is required that mimics the life force circulation of a heart. Given that Ernie was a programmer in his previous life, it only took him 3 months to create his own version of the reactor. Upon returning, he was finally reunited with the clingy Addie, who had missed him terribly. Back in his workshop, Ernie could now fully customize his mechs. He created a robot with such immense power that nothing could stop it. Just as Nora informed him that the enemy was on the move and would likely attack soon, Addie, feeling possessive, confronted Nora to mark her territory. Nora quickly clarified that she wasn't interested in stealing Ernie, which calmed Addie down. Then, Addie wanted to go on a date with Ernie, but he told her to hold off. There was no time for fun with the impending battle. Outside the kingdom, a rising nation called Salutek was growing bolder. Their king, Carlos, was confident in his army's strength, especially since they had mass-produced new mech models based on the one they had stolen from Ernie, those bastards. Salutek had become a dangerous threat, rapidly conquering territories. The first to face them was the neighboring kingdom of Seprica. They were preparing to defend Fort Sildatrida, hoping to hold out long enough to strategize. There, we meet King Seprica's daughter, Leonora, who was worried about her father. With the enemy at their borders, Seprica's forces prepared for battle, confident in their home field advantage. However, they were caught off guard by an aerial attack. Salutek deployed airships that bombarded the fortress and capital from above, landing mechs in the heart of the city. The enemy mechs tore through Seprica's army, which stood no chance. In a desperate bid to preserve his lineage, the king ordered Leonora to flee while he distracted the enemy by challenging the Salutek prince to a one-on-one duel. Unfortunately, the script didn't favor him. The enemy demonstrated their superiority, completely destroying the king's robot in a one-sided battle. Meanwhile, despite initially resisting, Leonora fled, only to be captured and held hostage. Ernie and his team had planned to do business with Seprica, but when they arrived at Fort Silda, they noticed the flags had changed. Realizing the kingdom had been invaded, Ernie wasted no time and launched an attack. He let the prince use his golden lion mech to break down the fortress gates and then unleashed his own insanely powerful new mech, equipped with his custom ether reactor. The battle was over quickly. Ernie's mech destroyed more than 5 enemy mechs in seconds. That's when he realized these robots had been built based on the one stolen from him previously, and he reclaimed them as his own creations. Meanwhile, Prince Cristobal, who had conquered Seprica, was eager to make Leonora his wife and was nervous about the defeat his forces had suffered at Fort Silda at Ernie's hands. Following the advice of the woman from the Bronze Fang Order, the one who had stolen from Ernie, the prince organized an expedition to crush Ernie. But what they didn't expect was that Ernie's order had been keeping a close eye on them. Ernie learned that Princess Leonora was being held captive, so he organized a mission to rescue her. Moments later, Ernie's forces and the enemy's army clashed. Prince Cristobal watched from the air as Ernie's Centaur mech charged into battle. Ernie didn't waste any time attacking, and neither did the Silver Phoenix Order. Upon seeing the airship, they started firing at them, though long-range attacks weren't too effective. Eventually, they engaged the enemy mechs in close combat. Prince Cristobal couldn't resist deploying his own robot, which wielded multiple swords-like tentacles, and confronted Dietrich, who held his ground. But as Salutec's general began suffering heavy losses, he ordered a retreat, giving our protagonists a chance to devise a countermeasure against the enemy's aerial fleet. Meanwhile, aboard one of the airships, the leader of the Bronze Fang Order was smirking alongside Prince Cristobal, only to later regret underestimating the enemy. Now, the protagonists were preparing to rescue the Sepulchre royal family, sneaking into Fontaine, where they were being held. Using their mechs, they approached the castle towers where Princess Leonora, her friend Isadora, and her mother were supposedly being kept. The problem was figuring out which of the 4 towers they were in. By splitting up, the team simultaneously checked the towers. As night fell, they flew through the city and reached the castle. Ernie managed to rescue the queen without any trouble, and Prince Emrys, who was part of the rescue group, successfully found Isadora. However, Kit had the misfortune of having to rescue the most annoying one, Princess Leonora, who resisted at every turn, claiming she had no other place to go and wasn't strong enough. Kit, in his usual chivalrous way, knelt before her and convinced her to leave by pledging to be her knight. Once the girls were safe, they marveled at the sight of the Silver Phoenix Order and reunited with the rest of their family. But the enemy wasn't going to sit back. Figuring out where the rescue team would flee, they sent a group to track them down. During this attack, we meet Horacio Korg, a tech fanatic like Ernie, who was responsible for developing the powerful weapons that allowed Salutec to launch their invasion. He was so eager to see Ernie's technology up close that he joined the battle himself. As Ernie noticed the enemy's air fleet, he couldn't resist launching his mech to inspect the arsenal. Horacio, meanwhile, was drooling over Ernie's unique flying style. Using the majority of his mech's power, Ernie destroyed several enemy robots and caused significant damage to the airships. Despite Horacio wanting to continue watching, the situation forced a retreat. With this defeat, Prince Cristobal was especially frustrated, not only because his plan to marry Leonora had been foiled, but also because Kit was now winning her over. The enemy regrouped for a counterattack, though they still hadn't identified who exactly they were up against. They suspected it was warriors from Fremavilla, especially since they had seen Ernie's flying mech. While the enemy prepared for their next move, Ernie and his team took refuge in the city of Missler, a Sepulchre stronghold that had not yet fallen. Ernie immediately got to work reinforcing the local mechs to make them more effective against the enemy. In exchange, he negotiated the right to claim the enemy's spoils of war. He also ordered the creation of anti-air missiles to ensure they had enough resources to take down the enemy fleet. As everyone worked hard to defend the kingdom, Leonora was moping around, slowing things down. Being the good people they are, the protagonists organized a committee to cheer her up, with Kit stepping up as her self-proclaimed knight. Despite her reluctance to help, Kit took her out to see the hard work everyone else was putting in to convince her to fulfill her role as a princess and boost the army's morale. And their spirits were indeed lifted once they saw their robots put to the test in the first wave of the enemy's attack. With the improved designs Ernie had implemented, the mech's resistance and firepower secured a crushing victory. But Salutec wasn't giving up. This time, they sent in the Bronze Fang Order, led by their ambitious leader, who sought a reward to revive her family. They attempted their old infiltration tactics, but failed. First, they couldn't harm the princess, whom they tried to ambush in her sleep. Second, they couldn't steal any of the mechs because Ernie's new models required special keys for their pilots to operate them. Trapped in a clever counter, the Bronze Fang leader tried to escape, only to be intercepted by Edgar. Remembering their previous unfinished battle, Edgar showed just how much he had improved, along with the superiority of his mech. When he defeated her, she regretted not killing him earlier. With this victory, Leonora expressed her sincere gratitude to the team and began preparing herself for the final battle ahead. What the enemy didn't expect, though, was that when they arrived at the protagonist's stronghold, they would be met with a massive anti-air defense. First, the sky lit up as the enemy was intercepted. Then, a rain of missiles from Salutec forced them to descend and deploy their mechs prematurely. The Silver Phoenix Order immediately engaged, with Edgar leading the charge as a shield, while Prince Emrys launched his attack, taking down several of Salutec's robots. The few remaining enemies attempted to flee, but the Centaur mechs caught up with them and completely annihilated them. Meanwhile, Horacio observed the battle, fascinated by how Ernie's mech flew. Once he had seen enough, the enemy ships were in serious trouble. Not only had Ernie boarded them with ease, but he had also dismantled them to the point that Prince Cristobal had no choice but to order a retreat. But Ernie, realizing that the first ship to lead likely carried someone important, chased it down. With no other option, Prince Cristobal stepped out of his his mech and confronted Ernie. In an attempt to sway him, the prince offered Ernie anything he wanted if he would join their side. However, Ernie replied that if he were given the right to create, distribute, and control the mechs, then he'd accept the offer. As for titles and wealth, he didn't care about those. The prince found this request inconceivable and decided to fight, but he was no match for Ernie, who quickly neutralized him, even disarming his secondary weapons. Defeated, the prince attempted a desperate move, planning to sacrifice himself and take Ernie down with him by destroying his own ship. In the end, the prince died as he watched Ernie continue flying. The scene felt disgraceful to the prince, who saw it as undignified for Ernie to use propulsion to fly. Meanwhile, Ernie used the distraction created by the prince's actions to secure the first major victory for his order. After the battle, a celebration followed, especially since the protagonists managed to drive the enemy out of an important Sepulchre city within a few days. Once things settled down, Leonora rose to power as queen, and Ernie, the tech geek, immediately got to work investigating the remains of the enemy's army. He discovered that they used concentrated ether in some of their weapons, giving them almost unlimited energy, but at the cost of melting their reactors after the first use. Ernie also studied the flight mechanisms of the enemy's airships, figuring out how they worked. However, what he really wanted was to meet his technological rival, Horacio, and ask him some questions. The girls from Sepulchre asked Ernie to lend them some of his weapons, which allowed them to recover the border forts they had lost. But at the castle Ernie was conquering, a powerful new enemy weapon appeared. Horacio, taking advantage of the resentment that had grown in Salutec, promised Princess Catalina that he would create the ultimate weapon, one that would not only dominate the skies, but also defeat the enemy who killed the prince. Thus, he built a mechanical dragon powered by the same propulsion system Ernie used. Ernie quickly realized the enemy was copying his ideas. Before he could fully contemplate it, he had to act fast to dodge the dragon's attack and prepare for the tough battle ahead. Without hesitation, Ernie launched into an aerial battle against the massive mechanical beast. Despite its size, the dragon was agile, dodging Ernie's close-range strike. However, Ernie kept up the pressure, chasing it in the air to wear it down. Meanwhile, a ground battle had also erupted, with a large number of enemy mechs. Among them was the guy with multiple swords, whom Dietrich had vowed to get his revenge on. Upon seeing him, Dietrich quickly engaged in a sword fight, but the enemy used a processor to enhance his mech's speed, intimidating Dietrich with his rapid movements. Addie, watching from the ground, saw how tough Ernie's battle was. Even though Ernie kept attacking, all his strikes were blocked by an electric shield. Determined to help, Addie charged into the battle with her centaur mech. She managed to land an anti-air missile on the dragon, creating an opening for Ernie to approach its command base. But in a sudden movement, the dragon threw Ernie off, sending him flying through the air. Though shaken, Ernie quickly regained his composure, only to face a surprise counterattack from Horacio. Horacio launched smoke missiles to lure Ernie in, and when Ernie flew through the smoke, it damaged his propellers, causing him to crash to the ground. The enemy seized this moment to try and finish the fight, but they were shocked to discover that Ernie's mech still had an incredible amount of mana left. Seeing the signal to retreat, they fled as their ether reserves were running low. Ernie, realizing he had been bested for the first time, vowed that things would be different next time. Though this encounter ended in a tie, it felt more like a loss. Still, Ernie's forces managed to regain their momentum and retake several enemy bases. Ernie knew he had to take some time to repair his mech, adding filters to protect the propellers. Meanwhile, the enemy was also making moves to secure victory. Horacio presented his commander with new upgrades to the dragon mech, explaining that this time, he had added an ether processor to ensure they wouldn't run out of power. However, there was a risk that such immense power could go out of control. The commander, determined to avenge the prince, was willing to do whatever it took. Both sides finished their preparations, with Ernie's forces planning their strategy to face the dragon mech. Princess Leonora, feeling guilty about being the cause of the division in their forces, decided to join Ernie's advance to avoid splitting their army. With her decision made, Leonora delivered a speech to raise everyone's morale. The team set out for battle, knowing they had to conquer a nearly impenetrable fort where much of the enemy's strength was concentrated. When the battle began, the enemy fleet appeared unbeatable. But then, our protagonists arrived with their anti-air missiles. This time, Horacio was on the ground, watching the battle, eager to see what Ernie had in store. When the dragon mech emerged, Ernie stepped forward, this time aboard a modified ship based on Horacio's design. Ernie surprised Horacio with this tactic and seemed poised to win, but the real deciding factor would be a stealth mission. A team of silhouette gears was sent to infiltrate the fort and open the gates. For now, though, the main battle was taking place in the sky. Ernie and his forces launched a direct attack, but in reality, it was all a setup. Ernie lured the dragon mech higher into the clouds, clouds where he could fire missiles without harming the soldiers on the ground. The electric shield was a problem since it repelled all attack. However, that didn't bother Ernie, as his mech slowly but surely cornered the enemy, allowing him to play his trump card. In a moment of distraction, Ernie's ship launched a special glue missile that set the entire dragon mech ablaze. With the enemy cornered in the air, the battle on the ground also intensified. The Silver Phoenix Order managed to infiltrate the fort and began opening the gates, giving way to a massive robot battle. The multi-sword enemy mech reappeared, but this time it was Edgar who had to confront it. Despite the numerical advantage, the enemy was slowly starting to regain ground. In the skies, Ernie and Horacio continued their duel, arguing about whose technology was superior. The dragon mech had unleashed its full power by using concentrated ether, gaining the upper hand. Ernie, realizing his attacks were ineffective, decided to launch a direct strike against the dragon. And sure enough, it worked. Despite the enemy's flames, Ernie was able to dodge and hit the command post directly. As the battle in the sky began to turn in Ernie's favor, things on the ground were improving too. Edgar held his own against the multi-sword mech, the most troublesome enemy. By keeping it at bay, he allowed the Golden Lion mech to deliver a powerful attack that completely disintegrated the enemy mech, leading the resistance. With their leader defeated, the rest of the enemy army collapsed. In the sky, Ernie had also completely destroyed the dragon mech by melting its engine. With no other choice, the enemy commander decided to sacrifice himself and his ship in a last-ditch effort to destroy Queen Leonora, who was watching from the ground. And as you know, Leonora, being her usual unnecessarily difficult self, refused to retreat out of sheer pride, making things harder for the protagonist. Ernie used all of his mech's brute force to hold back the falling dragon, but the enemy commander, with his remaining energy, launched a final attack, endangering Leonora, who still refused to move. This situation gave Kit, as her knight, a chance to shine. He struck the final blow, neutralizing the dragon mech's controls, allowing Ernie to safely redirect the dragon away, securing the victory. With that, the capital was finally recovered, and Leonora's coronation became official. With the job done, Ernie's order departed in their new ship. Although Leonora was saddened by the departure of her knight, she and Kit promised they'd meet again. Back home, Ernie was rewarded with his very own laboratory. At first, people didn't take him seriously because of his obsession with mechs, but his work soon proved valuable as he improved the kingdom's air force. Thanks to these advancements, the kingdom was able to conquer Salutek once and for all. Alright, that wraps up our journey through the world of knights and magic. If you love seeing robots in action or watching someone completely geek out over engineering, this anime is definitely for you. Let me know what you think in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more awesome anime breakdowns. Catch you in the next one!